play a game.
You seen Saw lately? Because I have. Let's talk about it. Okay, so if you remember, in 1995, David Fincher was a newcomer on the scene, looking to spice up the big screen with his new dark and gritty masterpiece.
Se7en.
The film shows the dirty underbelly of a broken society and a broken city through the lens of a broken mind through the cat and mouse game that ensues between two detectives and a criminal mastermind. Well, in 2004, James Wan, a relative newcomer, said, "I'll have what he's having." You see, Se7en is just an incredible film that blew all of our minds. No notes. And I have to assume that James Wan felt the same way, because when he was given his opportunity to put his mark on the cinematic world, he opted for a style that pushes the limits of the word derivative. Although being credited as the grandfather of torture porn, a rewatch will reveal a nearly PG-13 rated noir romp in today's standards. Because the movie wasn't really intended as a vessel for viewers to see people dissected, but instead as a more traditional psychological thriller. But the thing that made it stand out so much was that in every case where Se7en showed restraint, Saw took those dials and turned them all up to 12. In summary, both films are about a cat and mouse game between two detectives, one a black senior and one not, and an insane criminal mastermind. The mastermind has an overly complicated plan that involves a Dante's Inferno-esque ironic hell punishment type system, based on the twisted morality of the villain.
Up until now, you've simply sat in the shadows, watching others live out their lives.
Only in a world this shitty could you even try to say these were innocent people and keep a straight face?
Everyone lives in the 16mm grimdark universe. Both movies feature cops just a step behind the criminal mastermind, as they discover the victims after the fact and pontificate upon the nature of the crimes. Until eventually, the sins of the heroes make them play directly into the hands of the villain, costing all parties involved dearly. So let's get into a numbered list of how Saw takes the motifs from Se7en and puts a little stank on it. Yeah, makes it sexy. There's no doubt about it, Se7en has a look. Relatively high contrast, low-key environments, heavier film grain and a slight push of the tungsten yellowish lighting versus the green fluorescent lighting. Tastefully done. Now, Saw has all the same elements, but turns the dials up. And the color grade isn't the only thing that takes the more is more approach. Whereas Detective Mills lives in a relatively squalid apartment, it's not a dump. It's just kind of filled with boxes and painting materials because the couple hasn't fully moved in yet. And of course a train runs by every so often, shaking the entire property. So sure, it sucks, but it's not like he lives in a trap house like everybody does in the Saw movies. Successful surgeon? Must live in a warehouse with an exposed roof. Also, somebody turn a damn light on? People at home want to feel cozy. I know you want your movie to look a certain kind of way, but when you're at home in peace within your house, you want to be able to see around the corners. You don't want big weird black areas that you just can't even make out. And don't forget about Donald Glover Sr. He's a ex-detective, right? Yep, has actual graffiti on the inside of his apartment. Was that always there? Why doesn't he paint over it? I know they're playing for, he's crazy and obsessed with the murder, but like, graffiti? You see, Se7en uses its grimiest set deck in appropriate locations, like the crime scenes, or John Doe's humble abode. But Saw just makes most locations look this gross. It's someone understanding the look they're going for, but not really understanding when not to use it. Because in Se7en, some of the crime scenes are actually even quite nice looking. Context is preserved even though it doesn't fit the vision of the look. The greed guy's a successful businessman, so of course his office doesn't look disgusting. And the pride victim is a model, so her condo isn't gross. Plus, the blood in an otherwise pristine environment is used to push contrast of the ugliness that has encroached upon the nice exteriors, which helps amplify the feeling. If these locations were in Saw, they'd all take place in Mr. Robinson's neighborhood.
Would you be mine?
While I would say that Se7en is a very well edited film, I would also say that the editing doesn't draw a whole lot of attention to itself. But Saw makes the editing a whole ass character. Kevin Gruder edited Saw, and I would argue that he's at least half responsible for the look of Saw as much as James Wan. And again, it's not just about the color grade or the heavy use of the film grain. I mean, what even is this? Same goes for the music choices. It seems like in the noughties, directors were realizing that people who liked heavy metal music were also into horror films. Thanks, Rob Zombie. And so a lot of cheap horror movies were rocking the free post-industrial soundtracks, and I cannot stress how much that sound does not invoke a feeling of fear.
Freeze! I'll shoot!
Doubly so for the film's main score. absolutely sounds like it was made on a Casio keyboard from Walmart. The film just utilizes the insane editing and extreme music choices to punch up otherwise lackluster scenes. I mean, imagine this type of music and editing underscoring any scene from Seven. At this point in his career, James Wan just wore his influences way too heavily on his sleeve. It's clear that when asking the editor for whatever this is, the conversation must have involved some form of, remember Jacob's Ladder? Yeah, do that. And voila! Also, tell me this type of editing isn't more appropriate for a YouTube video than a feature film that's going to play in theaters.
The quick cutting of the film was to hide a lot of flaws in production, because if I held on some of the shots for too long, you could see basically the spit and tape holding the set up.
Whatever. I mean, this one speaks for itself. John Kramer, aka Jigsaw, is very much so inspired by John Doe. Both of them have a grandiose perception of themselves, and act as judge, jury, and if need be, executioner of men and women they have measured and found wanting, in ways that are very specific to their twisted flavor of moralism.
Murderers. A woman. Murderers, John, like yourself. A woman. So ugly on the inside that she couldn't bear to go on living if she couldn't be beautiful on the outside.
Hello, Mark. If you're so sick, then why do I have so many photos of you up and about? Let's put your so-called illness to the test. Sloth.
The biggest difference is that Jigsaw is just John Doe with everything in the kitchen sink thrown in. For instance, one of Kramer's trademarks is that he cuts jigsaw-shaped puzzle pieces out of his victims. In any other film, this would be a gimmick specific enough to carry a whole villain's identity on. Examples include Jason Voorhees, guy with a hockey mask, Hannibal Lecter, guy who eats people, heck, John Doe, guy who punishes people based on the 7 deadly sins. But James Wan doesn't believe in too much of a good thing, so here we go. Jigsaw, guy who cuts jigsaw shapes out of his victims. Guy who, as far as we know until the end, wears a pigman costume. Guy who uses Billy, the adorable tricycle-riding marionette sidekick. Guy who builds over-engineered traps. Like, any one of those is a perfectly good guy to be. You could sell a whole franchise on any one of those guys. He's just too many guys. And so this ultimately just waters down his identity because James didn't know how to hold back. And even though I'm not going to delve into the sequels of the Saw franchise, because by then I think that the franchise kind of knew what it was, I do want to point out that the cutting of the jigsaws out of people, I'm pretty positive just goes away after the first movie, adding to the feeling that John Kramer is just inconsistent. Even his name, you can easily go back and forth between John Kramer or Jigsaw. And that's not a massive drawback, but again, for clarity's sake, Seven has a villain who is only ever known as
Jonathan Doe. Whatever.
And speaking of consistency, John Doe operates within the confines of the 7 deadly sins, so it makes his overly complex, insane plans more digestible for us because we have a syllabus to work with.
There are 7 deadly sins, Captain. Gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, pride, lust, and envy.
The movie even shows us a list of the sins in order just in case you forgot from Catholic school. But Jigsaw's all over the place.
Technically speaking, he's not really a murderer.
What in the goddamn hell are you talking about?
Sometimes he's not murdering people because they're addicted to drugs, and sometimes it's because they're private investigators. I don't know. Though you wouldn't know from watching the movie, at least I had to look it up. Apparently, John is pissed at
Zap.
Yeah, that's his name. Because he's envious of the doctors. Okay, bud, yeah, poison me for that. But then he'll have like no problem demanding Zepp to murder a woman and her child in order to get the antidote to the poison Jigsaw filled him with. Now, wouldn't murdering a woman and her child be like exactly the kind of thing that would get you on Jigsaw's shit list in the first place? Wouldn't you prefer that I was envious over murdering people? Also, aren't these supposed to make you like appreciate life or something? So I was envious of the doctors, I murdered a wife and her kid, and now I'm not going to be envious of the doctors anymore? Like, you just lose the thread, what? In 7, we realize that the whole plot has been crescendoing into this moment where we fill in the final blank of wrath. Mills isn't just another random cop on the case, but an actual victim himself. The spider web of the plot has brought him to this point at the end, and John Doe is always streets ahead. And after revealing that he actually is the victim of envy himself, creates the classic meme of,
What's in the fucking box?
Give me the gun.
He just told you.
Similarly, John has been a sneaky boy the whole film and was only pretending to be dead in the room, where he had to be still enough to not alert the 2 captives that the supposed dead man in the room was a breathing, living person, who also needed to press buttons at opportune times without anybody noticing the dead body in the middle of the floor moving its hands. Because you see, if he was discovered, then I don't know, his party trick would be ruined? Like, what the hell is the point of him doing this anyway? It feels extremely ribbed for our pleasure because no one other than the victims would even know that he pulled off this trick. Like, okay, sure, you stand up at the end and go, ta-da! And then what? They're supposed to go like, whoa, dude! Whoa, blowing my mind! Whoop-de-doo, they're gonna die. Certainly they have bigger things on their mind. Also, in order to pull off your magic trick, you had to lie face down in a pool of poisonous blood. Certainly, out of the 3 people in that room, Jigsaw himself is the one who's in the most immediate danger. Hey bud, try not to breathe any poison blood. And then I'm supposed to believe that this guy's a genius. Okay, and then this segment could honestly go anywhere, but I have to bring up how pretty much everyone in this movie gives their career worst performances.
Now you either tell me what is really going on, or I'll cut you with this, you hear me?
Lee Wannell, I don't know, Lee is credited as the writer of the film, but for some godforsaken reason was also chosen to be one of the leads.
How do I know you're telling the truth? You could be the one who put me in this room.
Lawrence, calm down. There must be a way out of this.
Get up!
And either he just really wanted it, or it was a cost-saving measure because they spent so much money on getting Danny Glover and Carrie Elways in the movie. But whatever those 2 guys were paid, they didn't get their money back.
My family needs me! No!
And I guess in retrospect, it would have been better to save that money and then spend it on hiring some no-names who at least, like, cared. Danny Glover goes through the whole movie just as sleepy as possible. It just feels like it's just in a time in his career where he was starting to cash in on some of those, late stage bucks. We've seen it with many an actor before.
Right scene, right? We're gonna close this scene.
Very impressive.
But Carrie Elways, I don't know. He doesn't seem sleepy and like he doesn't care, but oh my God.
Where did you get this? Why didn't you show me this before?
He's especially funny as the film goes along because his British accent just keeps getting stronger and thicker as it goes.
God damn you! If you so much as lay a finger on them, I'll kill you!
I want to live!
Sorry.
I want to live!
My family.
Yep, that performance was worth every penny. So even though James basically remade Se7en with a broader, more suitable for a younger audience who shops at Hot Topic kind of vibe, he kind of luck-sacked into creating a hole in the market for a bloodthirsty audience. An audience that was recently living in a world where videos of people being brutally murdered on the internet was also becoming the new normal. Saw scratched an itch in our brain that was terrified of what was happening on websites like Best Gore or what we were hearing about in the news every day in Guantanamo. Whatever was happening on Saw, little Timmy had access to on the internet. But for the first time, these were mainstream box office hit movies. No longer were these types of extreme films relegated to the VHS collection that your creepy eccentric uncle had. There was a power vacuum and a gold rush began on who could develop more torture porn movies, where the big hits of yesteryear were all the Japanese remakes like Ringu and The Grudge. And as James Wan took Se7en and imagined what it could have been if the dials were turned up, so too Eli Roth took Saw and broke the dials off.
What do you think's going on? You would think that in the environment we have, the fear of terror and everything else, the last thing we'd want to be in theaters is terrorized.
By the time Hostel came out, we were truly in a new age of horror. So at best, I would say that James Wan is responsible as like a proto-torture porn movie guy. A moniker that, yeah, sure, he would go on to earn later. But this early in the game, I think a lot of the credit that was given to James Wan really should have been given to Eli Roth.
Well, the truth of the matter is, in times of terror, people want to be terrified, but in a safe environment.
For good or for bad. And in essence, you can kind of see the rise and fall of the torture porn genre following roughly the rise and fall of the Live Leaks era, 4chan kind of database of the internet, like as time went on, these things got regulated. I think people got less shocked by these things and we didn't see the news talking about them constantly. Do you know what your kid is looking up online? And slowly but surely, other horror styles would make a comeback and replace the torture porn genre altogether. James Wan himself being a large contributor with franchises that he helped create, like The Conjuring and Insidious. Our boy had done it again. So the moral of the story is that even though James Wan, in my opinion, kind of failed at remaking Se7en, he kind of failed upward and luck-sacked himself into becoming a father of a mainstream movement that ended up making $1 billion. I wouldn't necessarily say he created the genre, but he definitely popularized it to the point where mainstream audiences were into it for the first time, for like over a decade. And he did it in a time when America was at its peak curiosity on the topic. And he was very wise to take advantage of his destiny when it called to him. So I say, congratulations, good sir. Yep. I don't know. That's pretty much it. I don't know.
Game over!
So, what do you guys think is the new future of horror? We know the hotness right now is the A24 kind of gothic style of movie, my personal favorite, but will this go the same way in the future? And if so, what's going to be the thing that replaces it? Can't wait to get into it with you guys in the comments. I've been Chad. Till next time.